My name is Jess Niederer, and I'm the farmer and owner at Chickadee Creek Farm in Pennington, New Jersey. We are a 10-acre diversified vegetable farm, and we're certified organic.
Hi, my name is Meredith Melendez, and I'm the County Agricultural Agent in Mercer County, New Jersey with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. I offer education and outreach to growers, focusing on specialty crops, beginning farmers, organic production, and on-farm food safety.
And I started the farm in 2010, so this was our 7th growing season. It's on land that I lease from my dad on my family farm, and through the years we've grown bit by bit. So I started the farm with just 1.5 acres in production, and now we're up to 10 acres. And we also have 9 greenhouses or protective growing structures that we use to extend our season into the winter and into the early spring months for growing. I decided to begin growing winter lettuce and other winter crops because as a new business, I did need something that would set us apart from other farms that were doing similar things. Vegetable growing, there's a pretty low barrier of entry, so you do have to try to distinguish yourself somehow from everybody else who's growing vegetables. In our area, I noticed that there weren't too many people headed into winter production yet when we started to explore in that direction. So we grow winter crops to keep on making money through more of the year, but to also make our business special and unique to our customers. Back in 2010, which was my first season growing, we ended our farmers market season at the end of October. And at the end of October, you're still able to grow a lot in New Jersey. And while you're sort of wrapping up on field production, there's the opportunity to have kept on providing vegetables for people in the high tunnels. We were getting feedback from our customers that if we could keep participating in the markets, they would keep coming in the markets. So it was the heads up that the demand was there for winter growing and for winter crops. So when I started the farm, I did not have much money to be investing in infrastructure and investing in things to grow through the winter with. The very first structures that we used were called caterpillar tunnels, and those consist of nursery hoops, which we got for $5 a hoop, some welded rebar stakes that we made in-house, and a long piece of plastic, and then we just used baling twine to lash the plastic down. So we placed those hoops 5 feet apart from one another. They did okay with holding a snow load at that spacing, though sometimes I still helped them out and knocked the snow off with a push broom. But that is a really low barrier to entry way of getting started with winter growing. There are some tricks involved that we've learned through the years. One is to very tightly lash down your lines and understand that they're going to loosen a little bit just from the expansion of the line through the season. So before you've got a really big windstorm coming, go tighten your lines again. Another good trick that we've learned is to bury in the ends of the caterpillar tunnels, because if the plastic's going to come off, it usually starts at one of the end hoops. So if you bury in the ends and you bury the plastic, the edge of the plastic between the first and second hoop, you're much less likely to lose that house in a bad storm. But we've used caterpillar tunnels through the winter every year since I started, and we'll continue to do that even with nice new fancy structures like this, because there's no reason not to do it. One of the great things about the caterpillar tunnels is that you can rotate the crop. Those are movable tunnels, not movable in like the slide them from place to place sense, but that they're very fast to take down and put up. So it does mean that we're using them for spinach this year, and we can also use them for spinach next year. We'll just move them to a new location so that we're satisfying our crop rotation requirements. We've built a lot of tunnels that are a lot of different shapes and sizes just because of investing in them as they've become available at auctions or through used structures. But from now on, because we can afford it at this point, we'll go for a more consistent model that doesn't have the same maintenance requirements as, say, the caterpillar tunnels. So with this current tunnel, I should not ever have to knock snow off of it in the middle of the winter, which is fine to do now. I am 33 years old. I don't mind getting up at 3 a.m. and driving out in a snowstorm to knock snow off the tunnels, but I would also like to continue farming when I'm in my 60s, 70s, 80s, and I think my tolerance for that kind of activity is going to decrease as I age. So one thing to really consider in your permanent location high tunnels and hoop houses is that you want to use a fertility program that does not contribute to a buildup of soluble salts in the house. That's because it's not raining in here, so you don't have precipitation and snowfall to flush salts through the soil. So when I think about preventing soluble salts, I'm making sure that I'm using composts that aren't high in salts. For example, mushroom soil composts are often high in salts and should be avoided in tunnels. And I want to make sure that my amendments are used very sparingly if they have salts and are based off of a soil test. On our farm, sulfate of potash is an amendment that we use a lot out in the field, but I would really hesitate to using it very much in the tunnel because it is a salt and it's not going to flush through the soil. If I put it there, it's going to stay there for a long time. So those are things to really watch out for. If you notice your soils start to have a salty appearance on the top with little bits of white, it means you've got too much salt in the soil. You could either take the plastic off the tunnel and allow it to flush through from natural precipitation for a little while, or you could, probably in the summertime, start to have an overhead irrigation schedule in that tunnel that allows water to flush through the soil. That is depending on whether or not your irrigation water has salts in it. That would be something to consider in that strategy. So at this stage in our operation, the equipment that we are using in production of winter lettuce includes a 56 horsepower tractor, a 6-foot width rototiller that goes onto the back of the tractor. We're using a measuring tape for when we're transplanting in the houses so that we can keep our crew calibrated to the correct planting distance. And in our smaller tunnels, we're also using a walk-behind rototiller. And when we began the farm, the walk-behind rototiller is what we had to manage soil management, soil preparation in those houses. And that was definitely sufficient. We are also using a manure spreader in order to apply compost in the high tunnel. In this high tunnel, we can drive tractors right through the house, so we can use the same equipment we're using out in the field in the tunnel. Though it is much easier to fit in winter production if you have the equipment to make it go quickly. Because remember, I said that we prepared a lot of this in October, and in October, we're in the thick of our end season harvest on the rest of the vegetable farm. So it's likely that whatever you're doing on your farm, you're probably already really busy in October, and having the plan in place for how you're going to use equipment in your protective cover structures is pretty important in order to make sure you do it in a timely way. So growing lettuce in the winter is not terribly different from growing lettuce in the summer. They have similar needs. They need enough space to reach their potential quickly, so to grow and fill in their entire bed space quickly. They need enough nutrition to be able to grow quickly. And they also need enough moisture and enough warmth. And the moisture and the warmth is really where you start getting into tricky territory in the winter as opposed to in the summer. Because we're growing in protected cover inside a high tunnel, you've got a space that is much more humid than it would ever be outside for an extended period of time. And it's also a space that's going to have much more extreme temperature fluctuations than summer lettuce would experience. Even in a high tunnel, when it's not heated, you can have temperatures up to 80 degrees in the middle of the day in December, in January, and February. But at nighttime, you're going to have temperatures that will drop down to 20 degrees to 15 degrees in the airspace in the tunnel. So you have to be able to manage the lettuce to not be able to experience those extreme temperature fluctuations, or to be sitting in a really humid environment constantly in its life cycle. So when we're growing head lettuce in the high tunnel, we want to make sure that we're giving the head enough space to be a large enough size to where it's appealing to customers at markets. They're not interested in softball-sized heads of lettuce, in our experience, with direct marketing straight to customers. They want something that looks familiar to them from shopping with us in the summer or from what they've been exposed to in grocery stores. So that means that we want to give the head lettuce enough space to be large enough. And for us, we go for 1 foot spacing between heads. If we notice that our head lettuce is starting to fill in all the way to that 1 foot of space that we've given them, we harvest in a pattern that will create more space for the lettuce. So that does two things. One, it allows the lettuce to actually get bigger, and two, it introduces an airflow right down at the soil level next to the head, allowing the plant to be able to dry out and to discourage disease conditions where there's no opportunity for the leaves to dry out. When we're growing salad mix in the high tunnels, you're gonna have a dense planting of salad mix. And you also, the high tunnel bed space is very expensive real estate. You want it to be full. We have our rows for salad mix placed about 6 inches apart from one another with very dense seating within the row. But then when we harvest that salad mix, we harvest every other row on a schedule. So we're automatically increasing the airflow along the bed as we go. We transplant our head lettuce and we direct seed our salad mix. When we transplant the head lettuce and direct seed the salad mix, it's going to be earlier on in the year, so maybe October that's being done, early November. And at that time of year, it's safe to be able to use overhead irrigation to establish the crop. Overhead irrigation is going to do a much better job than drip irrigation in fully saturating the soil and well watering in your seeds and your transplants, making good soil contact between the roots and the seeds. So that's just about the last opportunity for using the overhead irrigation though, and that's because of managing the humidity conditions in the tunnel. Overhead irrigation gets everything wet, obviously, but that everything wet approach creates a lot of opportunity for evaporation within the tunnel, and it's hard to get the moisture out at that point. So whenever we're irrigating after that initial overhead, we use drip tape. And the drip tape that we use has emitters every 12 inches. It puts down 0.45 gallons per hour of water per emitter, and we do have to use more than one strip per bed in order to fully irrigate the crop. The lettuce in the high tunnel here has 5 rows per bed. We use 2 rows of drip tape to fully irrigate that bed. And that's going to change a little bit depending on your soil condition. We have a really well-drained silt loam here. We use a material called row cover to provide additional warmth for the plants in the tunnels. Row cover is fairly expensive stuff. It's available in different weights, and there's a trade-off in the weights that you can buy. The lighter weight row cover allows more light to come through to the plants, but it also provides less frost protection. Whereas the heavier weight row cover occludes a lot of light, but you are keeping things nice and toasty and warm. Row cover is usually suspended over top of the crop so that it's not sitting right on the leaves. The reason for that is that if it's touching the leaves and everything's getting wet overnight in the tunnels, it means that you're holding moisture right against the leaf and it's very likely to get sick. The other reason that you would suspend row cover over top of the crop is because it has a little bit of a greenhouse effect. One of the considerations for using row cover is deciding what sort of system you're going to use for putting it on and removing it and suspending it over the crop. There's drawbacks to all of them, and one thing to keep in mind is it does take a lot of time to cover and uncover the crop, especially because if you're covering it at night, you're supposed to uncover it every day. If you don't uncover the crop, you're trapping moisture in next to it, and it's more likely to get sick with either gray mold or lettuce drop. So if you're not keeping on top of removing and then recovering your crops, they are much more likely to get sick with those diseases. And if you had to, so that's the trade-off between keeping the crop warm enough and keeping the crop dry enough. And it's this constant trade-off in the wintertime. And with us, we will tend to err on the side of keeping the crop drier rather than warmer, because it's a lot easier to kill them with moisture than it is to kill them with cold. So one of the things that we do to try to make sure that our lettuce and other winter crops are well able to withstand very cold nights is that we don't let them turn into tropical babies from high daytime temperatures. So when we know it's going to be sunny, it's going to be above 35, 40 degrees outside, we make sure we ventilate these hoop houses very promptly. For this high tunnel, it means that we open up the roll-up sides on each side to allow air to pass through. So that will both make sure that the plants aren't turning into very tender growth plants that won't withstand the cold, but it also makes sure that we're getting out all the moisture during the day. In some of our other styles of houses, it would mean that we just open up the front and the back doors of those tunnels to allow airflow to go all the way through. And it is pretty important to open up both doors. You want a place for air to come in and a place for air to come out in order to properly vent a tunnel. Some harvest considerations for winter lettuce are that you may not touch the plants when they're frozen, and that will happen even with your best intentions and row cover management. Sometimes your lettuce is going to be frozen in the morning. If the lettuce is frozen, you have to wait for it to thaw to harvest it. If it doesn't thaw through a day that's very cold, it means you can't harvest it. If you touch it with a knife or if you touch it with anything while it's frozen, you're going to totally destroy the cellular structure of the plant and it will turn to mush. So you really cannot touch it when it's frozen. When ready to harvest lettuce, we want to make sure that it is no longer frozen. If it's frozen at all, you have to stop and wait. So I really mean it at all. If you harvest the first head and you notice that the stem is still a little icy, you've got to stop, not go any further, and wait to do the rest of the job. And I'm going to push aside most of the head and find where the leaves are nice and clean. And then I'm going to try to make a nice horizontal cut so that I'm going right along the bottom of the head, along the bottom of the soil. And then when I pick the head up, I can mostly leave the dirty leaves behind and have a nice clean cut. So I don't have to do any additional trimming to this head before I'm ready to take it into the wash station and pack it into my harvest crate. One consideration for lettuce any time of the year when you're harvesting is that this plant family has milky sap. If you see the sap that's coming from the tip, it is a little milky. So you want to make sure that when you have the next head of lettuce, you don't have nice leaves touching that sap and making a stain on the leaf. So I'll pack the lettuces, the first layer, so that the sappy stems are all against the bottom of the crate. And then the next layer, the sappy stems would all be pointed upwards, so they're not touching one another.
Gentle handling is needed during harvest, packing, transport, and sale. Rough handling will affect both the lettuce's appearance and flavor. Lettuce can be stored for up to 4 weeks at 32 degrees Fahrenheit and between 90 and 95% relative humidity.
The real problem that we've had in terms of insects with the winter lettuce has come in the spring, in early spring, and that would be with aphids. Organically, we don't have a lot of really effective options for dealing with aphids in lettuce. It's much better if we can just try not to introduce them to the hoop houses. So prevention of aphids includes making sure you're not dragging aphids into the high tunnel with you when you're coming from outdoor crops. So that involves just being aware of when you're working with a crop that has aphids. You may not then truck on into your high tunnel and introduce your lovely tunnel crops to all of those aphid nymphs that you certainly have on your sleeves and your hands. So attuning yourself to being aware of aphids and knowing that when you've touched a crop that has aphids, it means you are covered with baby aphids, whether or not you can see them. Whereas they might grow slowly outside in the wintertime, when you bring aphids into a hoop house, they're going to have 80 degree temperatures during the day. So they are going to multiply much faster in the hoop houses or high tunnels in the winter than they would on outside crops in the winter. For lettuce transplants, you should get them started in your production greenhouse about a month to a month and a half before you plan to transplant them out. You want to choose varieties of head lettuce that are going to be resistant to sclerotinia and that are going to be resistant to botrytis. So that's lettuce drop and gray mold there. And those are the two things that are really big issues in the wintertime houses.
Some sclerotinia and rhizoctonia diseases that impact lettuce can also impact beans, carrots, tomatoes, and cabbage. So crop rotation is one way of trying to keep those diseases out of your soil.
You might also want to consider the shape of the head lettuce that you're growing. And if you're growing varieties that are going to be splayed flat against the ground and not have good airflow at their base, at least plan to harvest those first when they're mature so that they're not exposed to being in high moisture conditions right at the base of the plant for too long.
Lettuce has been involved with human pathogen outbreaks in the past. These diseases include E. coli and Salmonella, but are not limited to just those two human pathogens. Farms should take care to develop risk assessments focusing on their specific production so that way they can identify potential routes of contamination and to begin reducing the chances of that contamination. Farm risk assessments must include worker health and hygiene, any water used at the farm, including irrigation water and any post-harvest water, animal manures that are used in composting or fall applications into the field, as well as any buildings that are used, structures including the high tunnel, and any post-harvest activities involving the crop. Food safety is an important component in producing a quality product. More information about this can be found online at the Rutgers Plant and Pest Advisory Food Safety tab. Additionally, full-day workshops are offered during the winter months throughout the state, where you will be given information on how to develop risk assessments, identifying areas of concern on the farm, developing standard operating procedures to help reduce risk, writing farm policies specific to food safety, and how to develop your own food safety plan specific to your operation.
We sell our vegetables entirely through farmers markets. We have a CSA program, but that's also run through the farmers markets. And once you're there, you have to build your customer base. And we've always found that in our first year at a farmer's market, people aren't totally sure about you yet. They're not sure if they trust your business or the quality of your produce. So you really have to do a good job at speaking with everybody that you can in that first year. We do find that when we're setting up our produce for the farmers markets, including the lettuce, we want to let the produce speak for itself and mostly have that attractive display be all about the bounty of the produce. In the case of lettuce, we want it to be a full-looking display, but to have it also be easy for a customer to tell what the size of a head of lettuce is, and let it be easy for them to select the one that they want without having to unearth the entire pile to find one, because people will damage your produce if you don't make it easy for them to grab what they wanted. Another consideration for winter farmers markets, especially if they're outside markets, is that you don't want the lettuce to freeze on the table. So if you're going to have days that are below freezing, maybe below 30 degrees, you have to worry about lettuce freezing at the market. We recommend having some kind of cloth or blanket to be able to cover the lettuce with if those are the conditions that you have.
Hi, I'm Martha Dunn, and I shop weekly here at the farmers market and specifically at the Chickadee Farms stand. Well, first of all, I love their winter lettuce. It is tender. It's nothing that I could ever get at a grocery store. I come here every week, and it makes a great meal for me.
First of all, visually, to see a head of lettuce like this in the middle of December when it's 30 degrees out, it's just amazing, and it's crunchy and it's sweet and fresh. That's the amazing thing about it.
Well, first, that it's organic, that it's fresh, that it's delicious, just everything about Jess's lettuce, which is wonderful. So, and all the different varieties that she has, and they last. Well, they don't last very long because I eat them rather quickly, but just delicious.
We like lettuce that have a lot of dark color and green, and even the red lettuces, because from what we've read is that they have more nutritional density, and that's what we're looking for.
So when I look for lettuce, I want to make sure that the leaves look tender, there aren't brown spots, they're not lifeless and limp, and you can just tell by touching it, feeling it. It's got really unique texture, especially compared to mass market, grocery store kinds of lettuce that you can tell probably have traveled afar versus just have traveled from just down the road. When I come here and I look and they've got everything laid out enticingly. I mean, as you look, go across the stand here, whether it's lettuce or the vegetables, everything is shown in a way that I get home and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've overbought, because it just looks so great. I spend probably more than I should, but everything looks great as it lays out on this table.
Well, other than the quality, the convenience of having them in our town locally, they're only about 3 miles away. So we see them at the Pennington Farm Market, and I'm at the Rutgers Farm Market every Friday. So convenience is the other thing, and being so local.
Even though it's a winter lettuce, to me, it's springtime in a bowl.